So Asus has done it again. They've broken my heart. Something I haven't experienced since Dallas Fried Chicken scrapped its bargain family bucket deal. Yes, just like last year, Asus has shunned us stubby-fingered folk and launched a supersized Zenfone 12 Ultra with bugger all sign of a dinky regular Zenfone 12. And compared with last year's model, you've now got that fresh Snapdragon 8 Elite goodness and a sack full of AI-type shenanigans. But if you already have yourself last year's Zenfone 11 Ultra, or you're even just aware of the very concept of it, well, prepare yourself for a sudden, strong sense of deja vu. Now, I've been playing with the Asus Zenfone 12 Ultra for a few days now, had my SIM slipped in there for some of that time, so here's my early sort of unboxing-y, first impressions type situation. And for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! So first up, what do you get in that lovely crisp white box besides, of course, the Zenfone 12 Ultra? Well, you got yourself a Type-C to Type-C USB cable, and Asus has also bundled quite a rigid condom case in order to keep your Zenfone 12 Ultra looking box fresh. And that's basically it, besides the pokey SIM pin jobby, so bugger all adapter stuffed in there. Now, remember that strong sense of deja vu that I mentioned? Well, you get the first inkling of that as soon as you pull the Zenfone 12 Ultra out of its box, because it looks basically identical to last year's model. It's yet another 6.78-inch Titan, although thankfully the bezels surrounding that perfectly flat display aren't too chonky, so it's not ridiculously girthy. Although at 220 grams, it's certainly got quite the heft. It's actually heavier than Samsung's fresh new Galaxy S25 Ultra. But one of my main issues is the Zenfone is incredibly slippery again. Every single surface there is smoother than my scalp. So yeah, I have fumbled the Zenfone 12 Ultra a few times. I'm not sure how I haven't dropped it already, to be honest, and it has only been, about a week. So if you're thinking of grabbing yourself one, I'd highly recommend at the very least slapping on the bundled protective case, or grabbing one of the official cases like this here, Devil case. It's not particularly attractive, but the rubbery surface at least adds a bit of grip to the phone. Only problem then is you can no longer use the Zenfone 12 Ultra's rather perky camera bump as a handy finger shelf if you are trying to use this thing one-handed. The same as last year, the Zenfone 12 Ultra looks quite smart, but it's not exactly the most thrilling of designs. At least Asus isn't trying to emulate the iPhone. You haven't got those horrendous flat edges. It's pleasantly and subtly curved around the back end, so it feels reasonably comfortable to clutch for something that's nearly 7 bloody inches in size. That frame is constructed from aluminium once again, and then around back you've got a matte glass finish. Not a massive fan of the black finish. It's pretty straightforward and not particularly thrilling, but you can also grab the Zenfone 12 Ultra in Sakura White, which has got a kind of pinky hue, otherwise sage green. And you got Victus 2 up front. Thankfully no scratches or nicks or anything so far, though I have only been using the Zenfone 12 Ultra for 1 week. No pre-installed screen protector on there, so you might want to slap one on just in case. And also this smartphone is IP68 water and dust resistant, just like last year's model. Not IP69, mind you, so it can't handle a hot jet like the good old Oppo Find X8 Pro at OnePlus 13. Anyway, let's shift gear and check out the software here on the Zenfone 12 Ultra. And what you've got here is a bit of Android 15 action with at least 4 years of planned security updates. Although I believe that Asus is still only guaranteeing 2 OS upgrades with this thing, which is still pretty meager for a flagship smartphone when most rivals offer at least 3 or 4 these days. But I do adore how Asus offers a clean stock version of Android on here, which you can select as you're setting up your smartphone. Otherwise you can go for the Asus optimized version, which packs in a worthy selection of bonus bits. So for example, this can separate out your notifications bar and your control center with all of those toggles. It's a setup I quite like, although I would have preferred it if you could swipe left and right to get between the notifications bar and your control center, which you can do on the likes of Oxygen OS. And those audio controls are excellent as well, including the Android 15 ability to switch the audio output between your Bluetooth speakers and headphones and the actual smartphone speakers. Honestly, it's so good being able to swap with just a quick tap like that, because the number of times I bugger off down to the kitchen to make myself yet another coffee, leave the Bluetooth speaker on up here by accident, try just, watching a quick TikTok or whatever. And of course, the sodden audio's playing up here, which confuses me for the best part of 5 minutes. And Asus's Video Genie feature also worth a squint, especially for this background listening tool. And this will keep a YouTube video, for instance, playing in the background when you minimize it, like so. Redmi Note 14 Pro 5G certainly gets my spurt of approval. It's a great way of enjoying a live stream or something like that if you just want to minimize it and get on with some other stuff at the same time. Although, having said that, the Zenfone 12 Ultra's massive display is more than spacious enough for enjoying a bit of video action up top while you're getting on with something else in the meantime. And as always, Asus has chucked in some helpful gestures and shortcuts, like for instance, you can double tap the old power button to load up the app of your choice, in this case the camera. And oh yes, that ass tap action is back! And am I still absolutely rubbish at actually getting it to work? Yes, I am. You won't believe how many takes that last bit took. And oh yes, that ass tap action is back, is back, is back. Oh, f***. Yeah, it's one of those actions where every time I try and pull it off, it takes me about 6 or 7 attempts. And then once I get it once, I've absolutely nailed it, usually. Just call me the finger master. Your mum sure does. But as well as that lovely stock Android vibe, you've also got very little crapware packed on the Zenfone 12 Ultra, just the likes of Facebook and Instagram, which to be fair, pretty much everyone uses apart from me. And you do once again get that Glide X app slapped on there as well, which just allows you to quickly pair up with your laptop, to share files, use your Zenfone as a webcam, etc, etc. And great to see that Asus has added a bit of eSIM support as well, which is certainly something you would expect to see on flagship phones these days. And while I had a few issues with last year's flagship when it came to the connectivity in general, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, etc., thankfully no such woes this time around with the Zenfone 12 Ultra. It's behaved itself nicely. Now, one of the biggest and indeed one of the only hardware upgrades for this 2025 flagship is the chipset that powers proceedings. You've got Qualcomm's Snapdragon 8 Elite stuffed in there now. That's backed in my review model by a very healthy 16 gigs of RAM. So of course the everyday run-in of that lovely stock Android setup is super silky smooth. And when it comes to gaming on the likes of Wuthering Waves and other demanding titles, well, the Zenfone 12 Ultra certainly does not falter, just like other 8 Elite blowers. I found that Wuthering Waves ran on the highest graphic settings at 60 frames per second with a fluid frame rate. I saw barely any dips whatsoever, certainly no visible judders or anything like that while I was gaming. That flat display is perfectly responsive as well. And the good news is you can get gaming for hours at a time, no worries whatsoever. The Zenfone 12 Ultra only gets slightly warm, doesn't get anywhere near hot. And yes, all of this gaming was performed using the Game Genie's high performance mode. I also made liberal use of various other features, including Do Not Disturb, the call block and all that shenanigans. And while you're gaming, you can actually boost that refresh rate all the way up to 144 Hz, but this only works for games that run natively at 144 Hz. There's no kind of posh upscaling type smarts going on here. And of course, one of the benefits of that Snapdragon 8 Elite, besides the fact that it's an absolute shithouse for gaming, is the fact that it supports all kinds of AI smart arsery, and that's certainly something that Asus is pushing hard on the Zenfone 12 Ultra. And a lot of the AI processing happening on device, so you don't need to be online for them to work. So for instance, sound recorder, you got the usual transcription. Smart's now version 2.0 with translation supporting a variety of languages. If you actually use this thing to make a phone call, well, you've got a bit of AI noise cancellation to muffle all the background shenanigans going on. And also, again, live translation if you're speaking to one of them foreign folk. You've got a couple of other time-saving AI features chucked on here as well, including the ability to summarize any article that you're reading in the likes of Google Chrome. It only takes a couple of seconds to churn out, nice and nippy, and generally it's on point, coming up with all of the most salient points that are discussed in the article. And likewise, you can also now get summaries of any documents that you download. Just long press on anything and then tap this bad boy here. And again, it's be broken down into a small number of bullet points. And then of course you've got the usual circle to surge, Gemini, yada yada type stuff on here as well. So overall a decent, respectable AI offering, if not quite as comprehensive as what you'll get on the likes of the new S25 series. Oh, and also before I forget, you've got up to 512 gigs of storage on this bad boy, but that's not expandable via microSD. You've just got space on that SIM tray for a pair of SIM cards. And while it's just your typical bog standard optical fingerprint sensor on here, not a swanky pants ultrasonic effort, I've had absolutely zero jip from it whatsoever these past few days, does its job nicely. Now seemingly bugger all change when it comes to the almighty 6.8-ish inch display that's slapped on the front end of the Zenfone 12 Ultra. Appears to be the same panel as last year's flagship. Once again a Samsung AMOLED affair with nice crispy contrast. The visuals are pleasingly pin sharp. Got HDR10 support on here, no Dolby Vision once again, although Netflix shown as absolutely bugger all HDR capabilities, probably because it's still pre-launch. You can piddle about with the color output as usual in those display settings. It's set to optimal by default. Got the usual nightlight, type I protection affairs. And the LTPO tech scales that refresh rate on your behalf down to the likes of 1 Hz for the always on display and up to 120 Hz when you want a bit more fluid animation. And as I mentioned before, got that 144 Hz mode for supported games. And in the pre-recorded pre-briefing, Asus didn't mention expressly anything about PWM dimming on this thing, which I know is a big feature for anyone who's sensitive to OLED screens and flickering in low light. So your Uncle Spert's gonna have to do some probing on that one, bear with me. But good news on the audio front, because you've got once again a beefy pair of stereo speakers on this thing. They properly blast audio right at your facial region when you max out that volume. The audio quality stays strong. You got full support for the likes of aptX adaptive, a bit of high-res audio, etc. And yes, Asus has not shunned that headphone jack. It's once again back in action there on the bottom edge. Now last year's Zenfone 11 Ultra boasted a 5,500 mAh capacity battery, which is one of the biggest of any of the flagship phones out there at the time. And Asus has stuck with the exact same capacity for the Zenfone 12 Ultra. Again, bugger all change there. Unfortunately, no longer one of the biggest as the likes of the Oppo Find X8 Pro and the OnePlus 13, pushing the 6,000 mAh sort of capacity these days. But all the same, no complaints whatsoever on the battery performance here. And the Zenfone 12 Ultra with my SIM stuffed in there at the end of a very long, very intensive day. I still had roughly a third of that battery life remaining. And my typical sort of day will involve a fair bit of camera action, at least half an hour or so of gaming, plenty of video streaming, plenty of music streaming when the phone's hibernating. If you don't go quite so heavy on your blower, you should be able to make it through a full weekend on a single charge of this thing. And it's the exact same recharging tech as last year as well. 65 watt wired charging takes about 40-ish minutes plugged in order to fully recharge that battery. And you've also got your basic 15 watt wireless charging support as well. It is only Qi 1.3 though, no Qi 2 support sadly, which I was kind of surprised by, especially as even Samsung's jumped on that now with the Galaxy S25 series. Now let's finish up this lovely wee Zenfone 12 Ultra unboxing and early impressions type video with a squint at that perky camera tech. And would you be massively fall backwards off your chair surprised if I told you that the camera hardware was very similar to last year's effort? Although that 50 meg primary shooter has changed up the sensor to Sony's Lytia 700, and you will notice the infiltration of a few new AI bits as well, including an AI document scanner, bit of AI panning if you're trying to capture something that's moving particularly fast. And you've also got good old dedicated pro mode, so you can tweak the white balance, the ISO levels, all that good stuff. You've got your histogram up there, up top, but no sign of any RAW capture sadly. Now Asus has slightly upgraded that 6-axis hybrid gimbal stabilization for this generation, so low light and evening shots generally come out quite sharp, unless your subject moves even slightly, in which case your pics will be the usual blurry bag of arse. And even in perfect stillness, those pics can be surprisingly noisy at times. Still, colours are accurately represented in natural light, and I didn't notice any obvious oversaturation in my test pics, even with quite strong contrast, unlike the old Zenfone 11 Ultra. And then like last year's flagship, the Zenfone 12 Ultra sports 2x lossless zoom using the primary shooter. And once you zoom in to the 3x level and beyond, it swaps to that 32 megapixel telephoto shooter with optical image stabilization. And then zoom in beyond the 10x level, and that's when the AI sharpening takes over, which is quite obvious at times, especially when dealing with human subjects, for instance. And then last up is a 13 megapixel ultra wide angle shooter, which tends to struggle with up close subjects, not very good for your macro type shenanigans. And yes, of course, did you even have to ask? You've got a bunch of AI editing tools slapped on here. Just tap this wee icon in the corner. Photo will be analyzed. You'll be able to circle any bits that you want to get rid of. Got rid of most of it, just got to perform a final bit of cleanup. And then there's the final result. These things can be a bit hit and miss. As you can see, it's kind of smoothed out the carpet a bit too much. I haven't got the same texture as the rest of it, but it has essentially removed that bit of table. And you've also got yourself an AI unblur tool on here, which I found, like all unblur tools I've ever tested, does absolutely bugger all. Now if you swap to video, you can shoot 4K resolution footage at 30 or 60 frames per second. You can also boost it up to 8K resolution, again at 30 FPS. You got AI tracking smarts slapped on here now with smooth focus and zoom in when you're shooting a moving subject. And I found that this works well with humans as well as animals. You can even add in a bit of bokeh style background blurring to really help them to stand out.
Hey, shooting some video using 3D audio at a very noisy Samsung launch. And now I've swapped it up to AI voice clarity, so hopefully my vocals will come through loud and clear, even though I'm stood right next to a big bloody speaker.
And then around the front end of the Asus Zenfone 12 Ultra, you've got yourself a 32 megapixel selfie shooter. Sadly, this can only capture full HD footage. There's no 4K option on here, which seems like quite the omission for a flagship smartphone these days. You can only capture at 30 frames per second as well, no 60 frames per second option. Thankfully, the stabilization seems fine. That audio pickup, once again, nice and clear. That's perfectly fine for snapping pictures of your mug, even in rather inclement conditions. And of course, you've got the usual portrait smarts with the adjustable bokeh action, etc. And there you have it, my lovelies. That in a tasty wee nutshell is the Asus Zenfone 12 Ultra. So as you can see from a hardware perspective, certainly not much has improved or updated compared with the previous flagship, apart from the good old Snapdragon 8 Elite, which as always is an absolute banger for your gaming shenanigans. And also means you got loads of AI smart accessories stuffed onto the smartphone itself, which all works locally. You don't need an online connection for most of it. Battery life is still excellent, and I adore the lovely clean stock version of Android with some of those Asus extra bonus bits chucked on top. But of course, as always, the camera tech, despite being enhanced by AI now, it's still not quite as slick as what you'll find on some other rival flagships. And while I don't know the UK pricing at the time I shot this video, because it is ahead of launch, it's going to have some pretty stiff competition in the likes of the OnePlus 13. And of course some other big ones like the Nothing Phone 3 lingering just on the horizon. So that's what this bald, old, tired, haggard northern twat reckons anyway. It'd be fantastic to hear what you guys reckon down in the comments below. Please do poke subscribe and ding that notifications bell for more on the latest and greatest tech, and have yourselves a ruddy, wonderful rest of the week. Cheers everyone. Love you.